Alright, welcome to PacWest Bigfoot. This is David, and yeah, junk. That'd be me working online so much. Actually, what I wanted to do right now is later on this week, just to let you know, I've got another interview coming out. Pretty awesome. Great encounter. Also, just to let you know, usually it's around Fridays or Saturdays that new encounter stories come out, but you got to remember that these are actually created around real encounters, so I only can work on the ones that I actually get, and I'm coming up to the very end of what I have on hand, so I'm going to start asking for some more encounters and things like that from you guys out there. So if you got any, let me know. Anything else? Well, we're coming up on the free giveaway as well, so if you're not subscribed now, head on over to PacWestBigfoot.com. You can click on the thing there that says sign up now down at the bottom there. So that's really it. This week's interview is actually going to be me, of myself. I've actually had quite a few of you asking me a little bit about my own experiences here in the Pacific Northwest, and I have been interviewed a couple times by a friend named Matthew Loomis, and also by a good friend and author, William Jebning. And I think one other person. I think so. I wanted to kind of share my experiences. Now my experiences, I didn't really have a sighting, but what I had was something that was totally, you just know it was something beyond something that you know about. Anything that you know of, actually. So that's kind of how it is. Now I do want to let you know and kind of set everything up with this, is that when I was young, I lived in Ashland, Oregon. That's where I was raised, and we used to go up to a place called Hyatt Lake, and there was a time up there where my mom, once in a while, from time to time, would hear these shrieks or screams when we were camping up there in the summertime, and they would come from a place that was just a little bit, I guess you would say, kind of northwest of there, a little Hyatt Lake, or north, basically, straight north from the lake. From Hyatt Lake, called Little Hyatt, and she said they would come from that direction, and she said they had to be at least a good couple miles away, but you could hear them in the night, and nobody really talked about it around there, but she said you could hear it, and it just sounded creepy human, and it was pretty interesting to hear her talk about that. But anyways, we're going to fast forward about a few years or so after that. Here is basically my experiences. I've had two experiences. They've happened basically within 2 to 3 miles of each other, and I'll tell you this right now, they happened within a span of 20 years apart, which is kind of amazing. So that kind of tells me that do these things migrate back and forth all over the place? I'm not really sure about that. You know, maybe this was the same one, or, you know, a similar family or group or whatever. What do you call them, a gang of Bigfoot? No, I'm just kidding. A murder of crows. You know, that's why I'm kind of like unsure about the whole migration thing. You know, how far do they really migrate? You know, are they all hanging out in Cancun, you know, in the winter, when it's winter here? I'm not sure about that. I really don't. Not after these experiences. So here is what I'm going to do. I'm going to set my coffee down. And actually I'm going to kind of draw out a little bit about, you know, kind of the area and where we were at. It's actually a place called Elderberry Flats. It's up in that area, which is kind of like, I guess you could say kind of, you know, southeast a little bit of a place called Rogue River, Oregon. We lived out East Evans Creek Road. And back then, I think I was in the 8th grade at the time. We had just moved there. It was like, I think, our first Christmas there. And we decided that we were going to go out to head on up to Elderberry Flats to grab our Christmas tree that year. It was pretty awesome. Pretty awesome, because I was like, nice. You know, we were living out about 5 or 6 miles out of Rogue River, down out East Evans Creek Road. So we lived, you know, at least a good 4 or 5 miles past, 5 miles past the high school there. And it was kind of nice living out in the woods, because I'd come from Ashland, which is a small town, but it's, you know, pretty popular little town here in the Pacific Northwest. So anyways, short story. Basically, we were going to go out there and we were going to get our Christmas tree that year. And what we did is we ended up getting to this area where, you know, here's the main road, and then all of a sudden there's this little tiny bridge with what was a creek on the side there. and it kind of opened up into a kind of an open parking lot area. And then what it did was there was a mountain up here. And then there was a road, it kind of stopped right here, and there was a road that kind of wrapped around that mountain and back down into here. And there was, you know, forest over here to the edge and forest over here. And this was basically old trees as well. And I mean, it was thick here. And so we pulled in there and parked right here. I remember that morning because my mom and I started walking up this way. And my dad and my sister and my little brother at the time, my other little brother, no, Brian, you weren't around yet. They started walking out this way. And as me and my mom were walking up, we got up here, you know, pretty far up towards around where it would start to turn and bend up around the mountain here. And we were kind of looking around. We were like, let's just head over to those guys and we'll kind of walk down through here. And we started walking through here. And this is when my mother kind of noticed these kind of footprints that started going down to the creek and then shot back up like this. So what we did was we had seen these tracks, and my mom was like, hey Dave, check these out. Because we all heard the stories of Bigfoot. My mom had heard screeches before and screams, like I said, at high lakes. So she was kind of unsure at the time, but you know, she was kind of leaning towards that. And when we saw these, I have to tell you, this is what happened. You know, my feet back then were a little bit smaller, because I'm not a really tall guy. You know, I'm like 5'7", so you know, I'm just barely shy of a disability check, I suppose. But here's the deal. I could put my foot in here, and I'm telling you, there was another half size or more, you know, almost a whole nother foot bigger than mine. And when I had to get from one to the other, back then, I mean, I had to really, you know, you can't even see me on the screen now, but I'm doing the splits. I practically had to jump from one track to the other track, and you could tell that, and these things were literally almost in line, in step with each other. I mean, they were one right over the other. It was pretty interesting because I looked at those, and I looked at my mom's tracks as well, I remember, and I could see hers was, you know, to the side a little bit. These were one right over the other, I remember. And they had to be all of, you know, I'm not really sure how big they were, but my mom said, you know, her guesstimate was about 16, 17 inches big, long. So that was actually pretty huge. And here's the deal. When we looked at these tracks, at first she was like, you think these are bear tracks? And she's looking at them, and next thing you know, we started following. And by the time we hit the road where there was some kind of snow mix mud, because we were in the snow here. Over here, it was probably about, you know, almost up to the bottom part of your calf. And over here was just around, you know, top of your shoe or whatever. And it was kind of starting to melt off because the sun was coming up. But we could still see nice, clear, you know, it wasn't even melting really. I mean, it was still cold. I mean, you know, you could... Anyway, it wasn't as deep on the road as it was off the side of the road, but you could see toes, and that's what really got her, is because all of a sudden, you know, we'd see this track where you had this big toe, you know, sticking out, and then, you know, these other, you know, basically, you know, toes. So, no claw stuff or anything like that, but the toe, she noticed, was kind of sticking off. You know, the toes would kind of stick off, and they were kind of back set just a little bit. And she was like, man, it's kind of like a monkey. It was interesting. I have my, you know, like I said, I have this out here in interviews and stuff like that. I'm trying to keep this as brief as possible for you guys, but... So we followed these things down here to, and they went all the way down to the creek, and then they led back up into this particular part. And over here, up this way, is nothing but mountains, more creeks, more just thick trees. And as a matter of fact, that morning, I'm telling you, the thing about the Pacific Northwest, if you don't live here, you can look into the trees, and during the day, say around noon or 2 or, you know, whatever, you can see about, you know, 50, 60 feet into the woods and everything. But when it's morning and towards dusk and stuff, you can't see 10, 20 feet inside of there. Once you get past that, it's like, you know, it's really dark. It's dark. And, you know, my mom's looking at these footprints. She's looking at the woods. She's looking at the footprints. She's looking at the woods. Next thing you know, my mom is ditching her son. She ran screaming over dad, I was like, what? You're leaving me? But I ended up running over too because it was really, really quiet. It was really interesting. You know, I had read some books after that, you know, before that fact and after that fact about Bigfoot and things like that. You know, Abominable Snowman, those kinds of books. What are some of those other ones, those older ones that came out with lots of stuff with DeHinden and Green in it and some of those other guys. You know, so I was, you know, we looked at these tracks, and let me kind of settle down here for a second. But looking at these tracks, I mean, they really were one in front of the other, and they came out and went down and then shot, you know, basically almost like this, directly back up diagonally into the woods. And, you know, I remember seeing toe impressions. My mom saw that as well, and that's whenever because at first, you know, back there in the big snow and everything like that, the deeper snow, we weren't really, she wasn't quite sure because couldn't really get the impressions with the snow so deep and everything. But once we got to the road where it wasn't so deep and you can, you know, some hard ground underneath it, we saw toes, and we saw toes in many of the tracks. So, you know, we might not see them in this one and this one, but we saw them in this one and this one and this one and this one. So, you know, that's what I'm saying, is that we saw more impressions with toes involved than those that we didn't. So over here, didn't really see any toes. Once we come over here, we saw toes. So it was very, very interesting. Now, what I'm going to do is kind of flash forward about 20 years. If I can erase this stuff good enough, man. I have to wash this thing off pretty soon. So basically, in a nutshell, about 2 or 3 miles down the road, little driveway, little bushes, this is the creek, this is a little camping area, and over here is a mountain. So basically, when you pull down in here, you got bushes this way, you got a thin little driveway here, then you got this open area with lots of like old river rock, creek rock, you know, barely any sand or anything like that, mostly just rock except for a little bit of sandy area. And it's where people kind of, you could go there and you could camp, nobody would ever know. Forest Service guys pass on by. They'd have to pull in to check out if anybody's camping there. And what it was me and my buddy and his wife and their little one. She was like 2, I think, at the time, and we were gonna do some gold panning and just kind of hang out and do some camping and stuff for a few, you know, like I think it was like 2 nights or over the weekend. Actually, I think it was 3 nights because it was a holiday weekend. But anyways, it was really, really interesting because the first night there, I know that his wife said later on after everything happened, she was like, I was feeling weird, I was feeling awkward, I felt like we were being watched, I felt like, I believe she told my buddy, but I wasn't really sure. I can't really remember, that was a long time ago, a while ago, and but she did mention, I remember her mentioning that she felt kind of like we were being watched, like there was something out there, but she figured it was something like a bear, a cougar, or maybe just deer wandering around, staring at us from time to time. You know how that can be when you're out in the woods. But anyways, here's the deal. We basically had a little sandy area right here, and this is where we, you know, camped, and then there was a little fire pit here, and then there was a couple really tall trees right here. And this creek had to be, even at that time of the year, it was about 12 feet wide, okay? And then up here was just mountain. And I'm telling you, this mountain on the other side of the creek had about 10 or 12, maybe 15 feet, nothing but flat area next to it, but then it went, I mean, it was up like this. I mean, it was just straight, sheer mountain side, and thick of bush, thick trees. You couldn't see it. The only thing that you could see up there was up towards the top was a little kind of meadow clearing. Not very big, maybe about as big as my living room and this office space, my kitchen, which really isn't, you know, is, anyways, it wasn't that big. But other than that, you really couldn't see anything going up there, barely at all. It was just so thick during the day. What happened though was the night that this happened, and I remember all of this clearly, it was just absolutely weird and intense. And I'm going to tell you, this was about 2 to 3 miles down the road from where we were when we were doing the Christmas tree gig, okay? So, and also this was about 20 years later. So what happened was, I'm, inside of this tent here. It's one of those big tents then, and they started having those little separation things inside. So I had my little area over here, then, the little closed off little section inside, and then there was the 2-year-old, then there was his wife, and then there was Mike right here, my buddy, and we were all just sleeping and everything like that. We went to bed. I went to bed pretty late that night. None of us were finding gold. We didn't find any gold. We were never been gold panning before anyways, but just something we figured we'd do for the fun of it. We even brought fishing poles and whatnot to goof around. We just wanted to get out of town. And I remember that, I can't remember if it was 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, somewhere around there. I don't remember. You can read more of the account. I wrote it a while back when it a little bit more fresh in my memory and wasn't morning. But here's exactly what happened. We were sleeping in here, and there was, me and then those 3 over there on that side of the tent. And whatever it was standing right here, or squatted down right behind the tent apparently. And his wife she didn't hear it come up or anything. I mean, she heard movement, but she wasn't really sure, I guess, because she was still kind of groggy. But what she said she heard was like a big snorty, not snorty, but a more sniffy kind of gut, just huge sniff, like. And all of a sudden, the 2-year-old just starts screaming. Bloody murder, just screaming like, ah, just freaking out, and all of a sudden she's up and she's all, oh my gosh. I don't, she didn't say, oh my gosh, she didn't really say anything. She just got it, and she was just I remember, I think she was holding the baby or something, but anyways, we all woke up, and all of a sudden we heard this thud, thud, splash, thud, and then, just this crashing through the forest going up into the mountain. So here's the deal. I got a thud thud, which means 2 steps, okay, and then a splash, and then a thud again. This thing cleared that creek in basically a stride. That's 12 feet. That means that thing had to have a stride about 5 to 6 feet to get on the other side. Even if it was running in a way and quickly kind of jumping over or whatever, doesn't matter. It still had to clear that 12 feet. Trust me, my cousin was a record breaker for long jump. She was bodybuilder, she was everything else, and I'm telling you, getting that far for a human being is pretty intense, even at a fast pace. But we heard thud, thud, splash, thud, and then it was crashing through the forest. We could hear it sound like a freight train going up there. And then we come flying out of there, and my buddy came out of there with his handgun, and all of a sudden, whatever it was, it stopped. It just stopped. There was no more sound. It was no crickets, no night birds, no nothing, no sound. He had the flashlight. He's flashing around the bushes across there, up the mountainside. We saw no eye shine, no nothing. It just no sound whatsoever. And we looked around on the ground real quick for impressions and whatnot, but like I said, I mean, this was kind of like mostly just river rock stuff, so you can't really tell anything. It's pretty compressed stuff. Even the loose stuff you wouldn't know anyways. But we sat there for just a few minutes kind of looking around. The girls got into the car, then we got into the truck. Truck actually was a Toyota 4Runner. And then we got in there, and we pretty much slept in there the rest of the night. It was pretty intense, I have to tell you. It was pretty crazy. To find tracks there and about almost 20, 17, 18 years earlier. And then to have an experience like that, and I'm telling you, this thing, you could feel the ground when this thing was basically trotting off. It was just thud, thud, splash, thud, and then crash, crash, crash through the woods up there. You knew. I've been around bear. I've actually worked when David Sidman was over there at Wildlife Images here in Oregon. I was there, volunteered for about 8 months there. And so I'd been around a lot of grizzly bear, black bear, and stuff like that. We even had a brown bear there for a while, I believe. And, you know, seeing these things run around and play and do their thing or whatever, you know the sound. You can feel the sound barely, even when they're running by you. You don't really feel this. You could feel the ground beneath you kind of vibrate in a way. You could feel the walking. Or the trotting, the whatever it was doing to get, it was just getting away. But this thing, literally, she said, she felt like it was against the tent, like his face was against. She said it might have rubbed his face up against the tent. She wasn't sure, but right before, I mean, it went sniff, scream, sniff, scream. She was barely up. She thought she might have heard something, so she started kind of going, and then all of a sudden this big sniff and then a scream, and that's kind of how it went, she said. And then because we heard that, all of a sudden I wake up, Mike's sitting straight up, and we hear thud, thud, splash, thud, and it all happened within just seconds. I mean seconds. Not to mention, within seconds, this thing was crashing up the mountain. Yeah, I couldn't imagine being a person being able to do that in the middle of the night, in the dark. It was dark outside. So to be able to sit there and get from point A to point B here and start crashing through the woods up there for a human being would be almost impossible without falling down or anything like that, or being seen by us with flashlights when we finally came flying out of there. So, I tell you, that's what's happened. You know, has there been any other experiences or anything? You know, there's been a couple times where I've been fishing up here around Southern Oregon and stuff like that, and once in a while you feel like, something's here. What the heck is that? But, you know, sometimes it's really just us, you know, in our own minds and everything else, just kind of playing with us and, you know, whatever. But I'll tell you this, you know, now, some of you guys have also asked me, and I just want to answer a couple other questions real quick. You know, asked me about, you know, what I think this thing is. Is it nice? Is it a predator? Is it this? Is it that? Right now, my inclination is to say it's a predator. It's an animal like a grizzly bear, you know, a mountain gorilla that, you know, runs on instinct. It's just smart. Like many animals. Many animals have a pretty awesome instinctual intelligence about them, and I think that these things same way. People ask me about migration, things like that. I'm not really sure about the migration because of my incident here. It tells me that possibly it could be a part of something, so I was you know, so that's just kind of my inclination for that. Other than that, I'm not really going to get into the whole evolution creation thing either. I'm just not going to go there with you guys. This is my experience. This is what happened to me. I am this summer going to be out and about doing a little bit more research around where I live currently, up around the Roseburg, Oregon area. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of incidences through the last century actually here, especially over the last couple centuries apparently, from the local natives experiencing things up at Cow Creek area, up behind Myrtle Creek area and everything else. So I'm going to get up there and do a lot of just checking things out, looking for sign, whatnot, check that stuff out. I have found a couple interesting things even on my property up in the mountain. You know, snapped off trees at about 8-9 feet up, right next to each other, two of them. The stalks about, you know, that round, and they were both just cleanly snapped off. They weren't twisted, they were just snapped right off, and then they were laying down next to each other. Interesting. You know, can't really see any prints up there because everything's so thick, mossy forest. So other than that, that is really my experiences for now, and this summer I'll let you guys know some more. I'll be trying to gather some signs and pictures and evidence and things like that. If I do get any, I will of course share it here. If you guys have any, send it to PacWest Bigfoot at gmail.com, and I'd like to share that on the Facebook and out here on the website and everything else. So with that, thank you guys so very much. Also, I want to say this, thank you guys so very much for being a part of PacWest here, PacWest Bigfoot, and everything that's going on. I am getting more of the encounter stories out for you, and hoping that I can get some more from you guys, because I'm kind of starting to get towards the end here, and I'm going to go ahead and make that call to action right now, see if you guys have got, if any of you out there have any encounter stories or anything like that, you know, I'd love to get those and share those here. So with that, thank you guys so very much. God bless you, and thank you so much for being here and for the donations to keep it going. It costs me money to run this stuff, and I greatly, greatly appreciate it. With that, thank you very much once again from beautiful Pacific Northwest. God bless.